Everyone, and welcome to today's topic. Today, we are going to discuss the chapter Indigo by Louis Fischer, which is for class 12. Louis Fischer was a Jewish American journalist. He worked for the New York Times and the Saturday Review. Few of his prominent works have been The God That Failed, Life of Mahatma Gandhi, and Life of Lenin. This story, Indigo, is an excerpt from his work Life of Mahatma Gandhi, which he wrote in the year 1982, and this book is considered to be one of the best biographies on Gandhiji's life. Let's discuss the plot in details. The chapter starts with Louis Fischer narrating an incident of 1917 when Gandhiji attended the annual convention of the Indian National Congress in Lucknow in December 1916. There were near about 2,300 delegates and many visitors, but one person caught the attention of Gandhiji, who was a very weak, poor peasant called Rajkumar Shukla from Champaran, who approached Gandhiji and requested him to accompany him to Champaran and solve the problem of the peasants there. The peasants of Champaran were sharecroppers, and Rajkumar Shukla had come to the Congress session to complain about the injustice of the landlord system in Bihar, and someone in the convention had advised him to meet Gandhiji. Gandhiji told Shukla that he had to visit Kanpur and some other places. Shukla patiently accompanied Gandhiji everywhere. When Gandhiji returned to his ashram in Ahmedabad, Shukla followed him. Finally, Gandhiji agreed to accompany him to Champaran after his visit to Calcutta. Rajendra Prasad was a lawyer at Patna. He later became the president of the Congress party and then after the president of India. Shukla took Gandhiji to Rajendra Prasad's house in Patna but could not meet him as he was out of station. They were accommodated for a night at his house. The servant at Prasad's house treated Gandhiji as an untouchable peasant and did not allow him to draw water from the well. He was also made to sleep on the floor. Gandhiji wanted to have more information about the conditions prevailing in Champaran before visiting there. He sent a telegram to Professor J.B. Kriplani stating that he wanted to meet him. Kriplani and his students received Gandhiji and Shukla at Muzaffarpur station. Gandhiji stayed at a government school teacher Professor Malkhani's house, which was unusual because it involved harboring a man like him who advocated home rule. Gandhiji had observed that in smaller localities, the Indians were afraid to show sympathy towards advocates of home rule for fear of being backlashed, tortured, tormented from the Britishers. The peasants got to know that a Mahatma whose mission was to help them was in Muzaffarpur, so they came rushing to Muzaffarpur to meet Gandhiji, who would be their champion. Gandhiji met the lawyers who briefed him about the situation. They told him about the fees they collected from the sharecroppers. Gandhiji criticized them for collecting high fees. Gandhiji's course of action was to stop going to the law courts. He felt that the fear-stricken peasants got little help from the court cases, so the courts were useless. What they needed was freedom from fear. The Champaran district was divided into large estates owned by the Englishmen. They compelled the Indian tenants to grow indigo on 15 50% of the land. The farmers were deprived of the indigo harvest, and the entire production of indigo was given to the landlords as rent. Because of Germany developing synthetic indigo, the value of natural indigo had gone down, and thus growing it had become unprofitable. The landlords charged compensation for releasing peasants from the 15% arrangement. Some peasants signed the agreement willingly, some peasants resisted and engaged lawyers and went for court cases. Soon, the news of German synthetic indigo reached the farmers, and they wanted the money back which they had paid to the British landlords as compensation. They understood how the British landlords had fooled them in getting the compensation for stopping the sharecropping. Gandhiji arrived at Champaran. He visited the secretary of the British Landlords Association for details on the matter. The secretary refused to divulge any information to him, stating that he was an outsider. Gandhiji answered him that he was no outsider. Then Gandhiji went on to contact the commissioner of Tirhut division. However, the commissioner also tried to bully Gandhiji, and he advised him to leave Tirhut at the earliest. Instead of obeying the orders of the commissioner, Gandhiji left for Motihari accompanied by various lawyers. He was greeted at the station by a crowd of peasants. He started operating from a house and continued his investigations. He also decided to go and see a peasant in the nearby village who had been maltreated. On his way to see this peasant in the nearby village, Gandhiji was ordered to come back. He did listen to the order. Thereafter, he was also given an official notice to quit Champaran immediately. Gandhiji signed that notice and wrote on it that he would disobey the order, and as a result, he was summoned to appear in the court the next day for a trial. Gandhiji remained awake the entire night. He telegrammed Rajendra Prasad to come from Patna with influential friends. He also sent instructions to the ashram, and he also sent a full report to the viceroy. The news of Gandhiji being in trouble with the authorities spread very fast, and as a result, thousands of peasants came to Motihari and demonstrated in front of the courthouse. Now, this was the beginning of their liberation from fear of the British. The officials felt powerless, and they sought Gandhiji's cooperation in regulating the crowd, controlling the crowd. This was a proof that the British authority was no longer unchallengeable, and they could be challenged by not just the literate and the educated but the illiterate and poor peasants as well. Strength, the prosecutor wanted to the trial to be postponed. They probably wanted to consult their superiors. Gandhiji protested against the delay. He also read out a statement in which he pleaded guilty. He clarified that he broke the law to give humanitarian and national services, and claimed to have no disrespect for the law but greater respect for the voice of his conscience. He clearly said that he was in a dilemma, in a conflict of duties, in which his humanitarian side has won over the lawmaker in him. Gandhiji was asked to furnish a bail for 2 hours, but he refused to do so, and which resulted in his release without a bail. The judge withheld the judgment for few days and Gandhiji was allowed to stay free. Prominent lawyers held discussion among themselves as to what would they do if Gandhiji was sent to the prison. The lawyers discussed among themselves and they decided that if Gandhiji was arrested, they would return back to their places, on which Gandhiji questioned them about the injustice to the sharecroppers. They again consulted and came to a discussion that if Gandhiji, being a stranger, was ready to go to the prison, then they, being residents of adjoining districts, who knew these cases of the peasants so well, should also uh, would also be ready to get themselves arrested along with Gandhiji. And then Gandhiji felt that this was the beginning of the victory in the Battle of Champaran, where not just the poor peasants but the educated were also coming out to support this fight, and they were liberated from the fear of the Britishers. The lieutenant governor of the province finally dropped the case against Gandhiji, and this was the first triumph of civil disobedience in modern India. Gandhiji proceeded to conduct an inquiry into the grievances of farmers. Testimonials of about 10,000 peasants were written, notes were made, documents were collected, and the landlords only and only protested against such an inquiry. In the month of June, Gandhiji was summoned by Sir Edward Gate, who was the lieutenant governor. Before he went, he met the lawyer friends and they chalked out a detailed plan for civil disobedience in case he was arrested and imprisoned. He had 4 interviews with the lieutenant governor, who finally ordered an official commission of inquiry into the sharecroppers' problem. This commission consisted of the landlords, the government officials, and Gandhiji as the only representative of the peasants. So, this shows the faith that the peasants had on Gandhiji. A lot of evidences were collected against the landlords. They were left with no choice but to agree in principle to refund the money to the peasants. Gandhiji was asked to quote the amount which was illegally and deceitfully extorted from the sharecroppers. The landlord expected that Gandhiji would ask for a full amount or a full repayment, but he only demanded 50%, and the peasants agreed to a 25%, which Gandhiji accepted. Gandhiji justified his accepting the 25% by saying that the amount of refund didn't matter. What mattered was that the landlords, the British landlords, were obliged to surrender part of their prestige along with the money that they were giving as a refund. This incident had made the peasants courageous. The peasants realized that they had rights and they had defenders like Gandhiji who would work for their welfare. And eventually, indigo sharecropping was completely stopped in Champaran. Gandhiji wanted to remove the cultural and social backwardness in the villages of Champaran. He sought volunteers for the work. 2 young teachers joined him along with their wives. Some others came from Bombay, Pune, and other places. One doctor volunteers his services for 6 months. They only had 3 medicines, and a combination of all these were used. These medicines were castor oil, quinine, and sulfur ointment. Devadas, Gandhiji's youngest son, arrived from the ashram to carry forward the work. Primary schools were opened in 6 villages. Gandhiji's wife, Kasturba, taught the ashram rules on personal cleanliness and community sanitation. because the health conditions were very poor in Champaran. Though Gandhiji was in Champaran, yet he sent instructions by post and kept a check on the working of the ashram's finance and accounts. He sent them instructions about ashram sanitation. He instructed the residents to fill the old latrine trenches and dig the new ones. Gandhiji felt that the Champaran episode of the battle did not start as an act of defiance against the British authorities. He just started the fight of Champaran to help and reduce the suffering of the common people, the farmers. It showed that Gandhiji could be not ordered in his own country. Gandhiji's politics was interrelated with the practical day-to-day problems of the people. All his efforts were directed towards making a new free Indian who would liberate India. This Champaran episode also taught Gandhiji the potential, the power that common people had, which he could use in order to drive the Britishers away from a country. One of Gandhiji's followers, Charles Frere Andrews, had come to bid him farewell in Champaran, and Gandhiji's lawyer friends wanted Andrews to stay back and support their cause. However, Gandhiji did not accept it and he opposed Andrews staying back and supporting him. He felt that one should always rely on oneself, and it was very meaningless to use Andrews, who himself was an Englishman, to fight against the English. This would show the weakness, and he felt that this battle was between equals. He would never become independent and overcome hardship in this manner if they took an Englishman to fight against the English. And this Champaran episode taught them a lesson in self reliance. And also through the Champaran episode, not just Gandhiji helped the poor peasants, but he also helped them um, to get liberated from their fear of the Britishers, to become dependent on themselves, and thus contribute to the struggle of Indian independence. Coming up next are few long and short questions from the chapter which have repetitively been asked in the board exams. Go through these short answer type questions and try to find the answer for yourself. 6 long answer type questions which have been provided here in the video are the ones that have come for the CBSE exam time and again. It would be advisable that you read the question, try to find the answers, at least 5 points for the answers. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it helpful, kindly give a thumbs up, and if you have not subscribed to my channel, then do it. And if you found or disliked the video, then do mention in the comment section as to how I can improve my videos. Thank you.